so this next video is kind of putting together solving the zero method, graphical method, along with, remember, using kind of tables to help me get to the right answer, help me to get to the right window. I suppose I want to solve this complex looking expression with my graph. Alright, so the window might be tricky. Now you could just guess and check if you want to. But remember, you can use the table to kind of help you get your window. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my calculator, I'm going to plug this in, and then I'm going to set up a table to kind of gauge, to look and see where my zero will land, right? That's what I want to find. I want to find where the zero is going to land, because that's what I need to find in my window. So I need to make sure my window's big enough that I can see my zero and find my zero. And then so I kind of use my table to do that. Since this is complex, it might not be easy to see. Alright, so first step, plug it in. So I'm going to go to my 3, plug in my equation carefully. So it was 3 times parentheses. Oops, that's not my equation. I have to find the equal to. Alright, plug in my equation. 3 times parentheses 6 minus x in parentheses plus 5 minus 2x. Alright, make sure I typed it in correctly. Alright, so before I go to window, I'm going to go to table. So remember table, I'm going to do a table setup. So table setup, remember, is above window. Alright, look at that, it's table setup. So if I hit second window, it takes me to my table setup. And I want to set up my table. Alright, so second window, you go to table setup. I want to start at 1, and I want to go by 1 unit. Alright, so I'm going to go back to it. So start at 1. So I do need to change that to starting at 1. It's going to go up by 1 unit. Leave those auto, and then go to the table. Alright, so now I've got the table. I'm going to start at 1, and I'm going to go up by 1. So now I'm going to hit second graph. That'll take me to my table. And now it'll show that table that I have in. So there's the table that I've got in my notes here. Alright, so there's the table. And then what you look for is, remember, we're finding the zero. I'm looking for, when does it change from a positive to a negative, or vice versa? When does it change to a negative to a positive? And so if you look, between the 4 and the 5 is where I'm going to have my zero. From 4 above, it's positive, greater than 0. And then below 4, or above, sorry, I said that opposite. Below 4, 3, 2, 1, it's greater than 0. Above 4, 5, 6, 7, it's less than 0 because they're negative. So that means between the 4 and the 5 is where my 0 is. Alright, so look between the 4 and 5, I'm going to find my 0. And so now I'm going to use the calculator. A standard window should work just fine. Alright, so standard window, so I should be able to find a standard window. So now I'm going to go back to my graph. I'm going to make sure my window is standard, or you can hit zoom standard and graph. And I know my answer should lie between a 4 and a 5, and it does. If you look here, the dash marks represent 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. Between 4 and 5 is my answer. I want to find that 0. So remember, we do that second trace, hit 2, which is my 0, and then first, so to the left of it, went to the right, make sure I'm to the left. Right, enter, then go to the right, enter, and then guess, enter. Alright, looks like it's at 4.6. Alright, so my 0 is at 4.6. Alright, and so I'm going to graph the picture. So 4.6 is here. It was coming down pretty fast, hit 4.6, and then went below. Alright, so there is, again, a simple sketch of my graph. That's my function. And so I've forgotten the question already. So the question was, when was that less than 0? Alright, so this was the equation. That was that ugly equation. 3 times 6 minus x plus 5 minus 2x. And I want to know when it's less than 0. When is it negative? And so when is this equation negative? Well, it's negative over here, right? That's when it's less than 0. And so on this part of the graph, it's negative. So on this side is when it's negative. And so I start at 4.6 and it's shooting off to infinity. So the answer is the x values have to be greater than 4.6. Greater than because it's not equal to, right? It's greater than because I'm shooting off to infinity, right? I'm on the greater than side, shooting off to infinity, so I've got to be bigger than 4.6. It's not equal to because I don't want to have the 0, right? I don't want to include the 0 because I'm not including the 0 in my question, right? I want to be on the negative side, not including 0. So the answer is that, and interval and set notation, so every x such that x is greater than 4.6 will give me out a negative number, or interval notation starting at 4.6 but not including 4.6, shooting off to infinity. And you can check your answer, plug 5 in. If you plug 5 into that equation, 5 is bigger than 4.6, it should give you a negative number, and it does. Alright, it would put me down here, which is a negative number. And actually, you can use your graph to do that. You can hit second trace value, select value. Alright, then at the bottom of the screen it says, well, what value? Well, plug in 5. Alright, plug in 5, it gives me the y value -2, so the answer does come out -2. Alright, so I've checked and it is correct. Alright, so that's just another example of how you can do it graphically. There we go. Alright, so graphically. So the last thing is just kind of a summary of, now we usually use numerical solutions to help us with graphical solutions, and so graphically or symbolically. Symbolically just means algebraically, so you can solve these by hand. I did a few examples of that. You can solve them graphically. There's 2 methods to solve them graphically. Right, you can use the 0 method, or you can use the graph and find where they intersect method. And the numerical method is really just to help you get to a window that you can use for the graphical solution, really. Alright, so the last thing, so we have one more video to go over. The last thing is going to be compound inequality. So that's what we're going to get to in the next set, compound inequalities. Alright, so I'm going to stop the video there.